Next up, Tencent Huyen, which has created Huyen 3D. This is definitely one of the best, if not the best, AI 3D model generators out there, just released an even better version. Huyen 3D 3. This features 3 times higher precision and way better resolution, enabling you to generate what they call Ultra HD models with insane detail. This can also produce really realistic faces with natural looking contours and also realistic body poses. It's really good at capturing everything very accurately. For other 3D model generators, they often have problems like distorted features or really stiff poses, but Huyen 3D 3.0 solves all of this. The texture mapping is also improved significantly. Now, you can just input one image and it would generate a complete 3D model of the character. Now, of course, in order to do that, it needs to predict and fill in any parts that are missing from the original image, such as the back of the character. But this AI is able to do this and kind of guess what the other parts of the character would look like very accurately. So I must say this is currently the best 3D model generator you can use right now. And best of all, you can try it for free. So I'm going to link to this page in the description below. You just need to sign up for a free account. So simply enter your email here to receive a verification code. And then once you're in, you can start generating 3D models using version 3. So first of all, let me just right click and then translate everything to English. Basically, here is where you would just enter a prompt to generate a 3D model. And then here's image to 3D model. Here's where you can choose to upload one image or multiple images of your character at different angles to give it even more accuracy. And then here's where you would select the model. Of course, yes, we will go with version 3. Here's where you would set the model face count. So of course, the higher the face count, the more detailed the model will be, but it's going to be larger and take up more data. And that's pretty much it. So let's say we upload this photo of this character. Notice that this is just a 2D drawing, but here is what we get. Look at the insane details and accuracy of this 3D model. And not only is it able to generate, the shape of the character, but also fill in the texture of this model appropriately. This is just so damn good. Or here's another example. If your input image is this, here is what we get. Notice that it's able to preserve all the facial features, and it's also able to predict the back of the character like this. Super impressive. So if you're interested in trying this out, I'll link to this page in the description below. Notice that once you sign up for free, you do get like 20 free credits, which you can use for any generation. This is definitely the best AI 3D model generator you can use right now. So definitely give this a shot if you're into 3D modeling. Also this week, we have some really cool free and open source image tools released. So this first one is called SRPO by Tencent. So they basically took one of the previous leading AI image models called Flux, and they fine-tuned it further with their own data and training method to make it even better. In fact, they claim that it improves the realism and aesthetic quality of the images by 3 times over the original Flux model. So here are some example generations. Here's a close-up of a white flower, and as you can see, this does look very realistic. Or here's a small blue-gray butterfly on a white and yellow flower. And again, as you can see, this looks very realistic. This doesn't have that very plastic and polished vibe that you get with the original Flux model. Or here's another example where we have a gray tabby cat resting on a wooden log under bright sunlight. I mean, it's pretty much impossible to tell that this was AI generated. This just looks like a normal amateur photo. Or here's an orange tabby cat looking down like this. Here's a regular woman with dark skin and short black hair with a yellow floral dress. Notice that this doesn't have that perfect Flux face. She just looks like an average woman, and this looks like a really average and real photo. Or here's another generation of this traditional Chinese building, and again, notice that the aesthetic of this looks super real, as if this was just taken by a normal camera. Here's another landscape example. This looks so realistic. And then here are 2 young ladies at a dinner table. Notice the faces look less plastic and fake than the original Flux model, which for your reference looks something like this. Now, it can do much more than just realistic photos. So it's also really good at paintings and Renaissance art and other art styles. So here's one example. Here's another example of the famous Starry Night painting. Now, interestingly, if you prompt it with girl with a pearl earring.jpg, here is what you get. Pretty cool. Notice that this is not the original photo. This is an AI generated photo of the painting. Or here's a digital line art sketch of a Japanese schoolgirl, and here is what you get. This also looks very real. Apparently, it's also able to generate gameplay scenes like this, or a scene from a horror film like this. Notice that the realism and aesthetic quality just looks way better than the original Flux model. And then here's an example of some Renaissance art. Now, if you compare this new SRPO technique with another recent model called Flux Kriya, which is fine-tuned to generate really realistic and amateur images like this, notice that SRPO does even better. So if you look at these charts, notice that SRPO wins over Flux Kriya most of the time. By the way, Flux Kriya is also really good. But anyways, back to here, the nice thing is they've released everything already. So if you scroll up to the top of the page, here's the Hugging Face link to the models, plus here is the GitHub repo, which if you click into this, it contains all the instructions on how to download and run this locally on your computer. They've even released a workflow for you to use this in Comfy UI. But here's the thing, if you click into their official Hugging Face repo, notice that the model is almost 50 gigabytes in size. So in theory, you're gonna need like 50 gigabytes of VRAM in order to run this, which I assume most of you don't have. Fortunately, because this is open source, some kind folks have already provided some GGUFs or more compressed versions of this, which can run on lower VRAM. So for example, this Q2 one is only 4 gigabytes in size, so you can run this with as low as like 6 gigabytes of VRAM. Anyways, all the links are up here, so if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Now, that's not the only state-of-the-art image model that was released this week. So we also have another one called Yumo by ByteDance, and this is extremely good for style and reference transfer. This AI basically allows you to generate photos of reference characters or objects. So for example, let's say you have this dude and this can. Well, you can generate a photo of the dude holding the can like this. Or here's another example where you can get this elf to wear this pink t-shirt, plus also add the text UXO team onto the t-shirt like this. Now, instead of a character or object, you can also upload multiple characters and add them to the same photo like this. Or here's another example, and another one. Or here's another example where you can get all three of these characters to play poker like this. Here they're comparing Umo with a previous tool that they released called Uno. And as you can see, Umo is just way better at transferring your reference character's face onto the photo, as you can see with these examples. The nice thing is at the top here, they've actually released some free Hugging Face spaces for you to try this out online. So notice that there's actually two different versions of Umo. One is based off of this other tool that they released called Uno, and the other version is based off of OmniGen 2, which is another semantic image editing model, which I featured a few months ago. Now, there are some subtle differences between each version, so it really depends on what you prefer. I'm just going to try out this OmniGen 2 version, and here's what the interface looks like. It's pretty self-explanatory, so here is where you would enter your prompt describing the image you want to generate, and then here is where you can upload up to 3 reference images of characters or objects. And here's where you would enter your negative prompt. These are all the things that you want to exclude from your image. And then here's where you would specify the dimensions of your generation. So for example, I can upload these 3 characters and then put them all in the same image, and then here is what we get. Or here's another example where I can use these 3 characters and get them to sit in a classroom, and here's the result. Now, in addition to these free Hugging Face spaces, which you can try out online, they've also released a GitHub repo, which if you scroll down a bit contains all the instructions on how to download and run this locally on your computer. Plus, they even offer some Comfy UI workflows, so you can just download these images and then drag and drop it onto your Comfy UI interface to load up the pre-built workflow. and they have not specified the minimum VRAM requirement for this, but if you click into the Hugging Face repo, notice that the models for each version are pretty small. So even the Uno version is less than 2 gigabytes. So you should be able to run this on most consumer grade GPUs. Anyways, all the links are up here. So if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. Next up, we have some new state-of-the-art open source models that were released this week. One of them is called LinkFlash 2.0 by Inclusion AI. And this one is actually pretty crazy. So this is a mixture of experts model with 100 billion total parameters. Think of this as like a team of agents working together to help you solve a task. However, even though this is the total parameter count, notice that it only uses 6.1 billion active parameters. These are basically the parameters that are used when you are using the model. So it's very efficient. Here it says that it achieves state-of-the-art performance among models that are 40 billion parameters in size, even though this one is only around 6 billion active parameters. And it's especially good in complex reasoning, code generation, and front-end development. So here are some comparisons for your reference. LinkFlash is the blue bar. Again, note that this is 6 billion active parameters, whereas they're comparing this with Qwen 3, the orange bar, which is 32 billion parameters, and Seed OSS, which is 36 billion parameters, and then even larger models. But as you can see, for most of these benchmarks, like graduate level science questions or competitive math or solving visual puzzles, notice that on average, LinkFlash beats the rest of these larger models. And then here we have like coding and health-related questions, finance, reasoning, and creative writing. And again, on average, LinkFlash beats the rest of these larger models. Now, because of its unique architecture and because this is very efficient, it only uses 6 billion parameters, this is blazing fast. So here's a comparison with the same prompt of LinkFlash with ByteDance's Seed OSS 36B, and note how much faster LinkFlash 2 is. Here it says it can achieve over 200 tokens per second. The awesome thing is they've released this already. So you can download this on Hugging Face or ModelScope. Plus here it contains all the instructions on how to download and run this locally on your computer. Anyways, all right, next up, this open source model is even crazier. So Alibaba just released Tongyi Deep Research. This is a deep research AI agent which matches the performance of OpenAI's deep research. Now, this isn't just any AI model, but an agentic large language model, which means that it can autonomously do multiple steps like searching the web and running code and synthesizing information for you. And it can think and work for a really long time to help you solve a particular task. This is similar to OpenAI's deep research as well as Google's Gemini deep research. And if you look at all these benchmarks which test an AI's knowledge or agentic capabilities, notice that this new Tongyi deep research, which is the purple bar, on average even outperforms the closed proprietary models like Gemini deep research or OpenAI deep research, as well as Claude 4 Sonnet. But here's the crazy thing. So this Tongyi deep research is a mixture of experts model with only 30 billion total parameters. So again, think of this as like a team of experts working together to help you solve a particular task. But note that when you use it, only around 3 billion parameters are activated. So this is essentially just like a 3 billion parameter model, but it even beats closed deep research models, which are at least hundreds of billions parameters, if not over 1 trillion parameters, which is pretty crazy. Like this Tongyi deep research is hundreds of times smaller and more efficient, but it even outperforms the other deep research models. And for even better performance, they offer this deep research heavy mode, which runs multiple agents simultaneously, each researching different parts of the query and then synthesizing all their findings together. And this enables it to handle very complex multi-step tasks without being overloaded. So here are some really tricky examples for your reference. You can get it to look for the name of a university that meets the following criteria. It has to be established between this range, plus there has to be no university established in that administrative region of the country for more than 30 years prior to its establishment. plus the university bill has to be passed in the immediate year following the announcement, etc., etc. The founding chancellor's husband was a doctor, and until this date, the founding chancellor had 4 children and 4 grandchildren, plus the founding president of the university has to also be the president of a college at the same time, etc., etc. So these are all really complex conditions that it needs to filter out. It can't just do this with one or even several Google searches. It's a really deep research task. So after doing a really long string of web searches for various search terms and then looking at the information for each university and applying the correct filters, etc., notice that it took like several minutes to complete this task. So this is not something that it can easily answer within a few seconds. But then afterwards, here is our final result. And it only found one university that fits all of this criteria, which is this one. And here is the supporting evidence. Or here's another PhD level math question, which I am too dumb to understand. But again, this is supposed to take a ton of steps, and most of the common AI models out there, which you use in regular everyday chat, are not able to solve this. So again, it has to think for a really long time and even search the web for advice. But after a few minutes, it gives us a full comprehensive report. Anyways, the really awesome thing is they've actually released this super powerful deep research agent. I can't believe we actually have an open source model that matches the capability of Gemini and OpenAI deep research. But as you can see, the model is already released on Hugging Face. Note that this is around 60 gigabytes in size, so you do need like multiple consumer-grade GPUs to run this. And then over here, they released a GitHub repo, which contains all the instructions on how to download and run this locally on your computer. Anyways, all the links are up here, plus this page goes pretty deep into the technical details on how they designed and trained this. So if you're interested in reading further, I'll link to this main page in the description below. So this week, in just around 2 weeks since Google released their insane image editor called Nano Banana, and ByteDance releases pretty much the same thing called Seedream 4.0, we have yet another contender this week called Reeve. Now, Reeve has existed before already. This was one of the best image generators out there, but this week they released a new update which allows you to edit images very seamlessly. So you can log in or sign up for free, and you do get some free credits for some generations. And once you're in, it's pretty simple to use. Here is where you can ask it to generate an image, or you can upload an existing image and prompt it to edit the image however you like. So for example, let's turn this into daytime and then press enter. As you can see here, it proceeds to generate 3 different variations. And here is what you get. Now notice that her pose and her face plus her hair do change quite a bit in the generation. So this is not as good as Nano Banana or Seedream 4.0 in terms of, consistency and preservation. Or here's another example. Let's upload this photo and turn her hair blonde and her dress red. Let's see if it can execute this without changing the details of the original photo. And in this instance, at least 2 of the 3 photos were actually pretty good. So for your reference, here is what the final image looks like. So here's the before and here's the after. Now I also tested some really tricky prompts which Seedream and or Nano Banana were able to handle. So for example, if this is my input photo, I want to get it to make a fisheye overhead view of the scene. And notice that Seedream was able to handle this beautifully. However, for Reeve, although it did make a fisheye overhead view, it completely removed the character and generated a completely different scene. Here's another really tricky test for model consistency. If I upload this Destiny Gundam and get to make a model sheet of this character with a front, back, and side view, notice that Seedream and Nano Banana were able to handle this pretty well. But for Reeve, if you look closely, the details of this Gundam are kind of messed up. Like there's a lot of noise and weird lines everywhere along this generation. So in terms of character consistency, it's not as good as Seedream or Nano Banana. And then here's an even crazier test which Seedream was able to pull off. So I basically went to Google Maps and turned on the satellite layer and took a random screenshot of this place. And I asked it to make a photo of the front of this building. For your reference, here is what the actual building looks like. And as you can see, Seedream was the only one that was able to handle this, whereas both Nano Banana and Reeve just generated some random buildings. By the way, if you haven't heard of Seedream, this is currently the best image generator and editor out there. Definitely see this video where I do a full deep dive on Seedream 4.0. But anyways, back to Reeve, here's where it's actually better. So you can upload any image like this, and then at the top here, if you press edit, it will actually automatically detect all the objects and their positions in the image. So let's give this a few seconds for it to run. And then afterwards, you can see that there's a young adult here, another young adult here, and here, plus this table, cafe, table, etc. And afterwards, you can actually drag and adjust the size and proportions of each thing. So for example, you can drag this table to be a bit larger like this, and then click apply edit. And here is what you get. So here's the before, here's the after. How cool is that? You can also expand the details of each object or person. So for example, let's click on this young adult and expand this, and you can see the face of the adult and the hand of the adult here, which you can adjust further. Or on this table, there is a cup of coffee, and there's another coffee over here. There's a croissant and a smartphone over here. So for example, let's click on this coffee cup and then click on this pen icon. And instead of white, let's turn this into a red coffee cup on a saucer, and then click apply edits. And here is what we get. How cool is that? So this feature is really good in helping you micro edit certain parts of the image without affecting the rest of the image. Whereas, for the base model of Nano Banana or Seedream, you don't really have this positional control. Here's another example. I can select this woman and drag her down here and also adjust the proportion of this so it makes her flatter. And here is what we get. How cool is that? Or here's another example where you can select an area on your canvas where you want to add a particular object, and it would add the objects to that area without affecting the rest of your photo. So again, this feature allows you to really micro edit your images. Or here's another example where we can only select the golden retriever and turn it into a black panther. And here is what you get. Notice that it only changes the dog without affecting the rest of the photo. Here's another cool example where you can just select this fish and then drag the outline, which would basically resize the fish. So definitely check out Reeve. You can currently sign up and use this for free. If you're interested, I'll link to this in the description below. In humanoid robot news, first of all, we have this really cool demo of this robotic hand called the Wuji hand by Wuji Tech. And this is actually a super flexible and powerful hand, which is designed to work just like the human hand. So notice that the scale is 1:1. This is pretty much the same size as the human hand. This is extremely dexterous with 20 active degrees of freedom, around 4 degrees per finger. And as you can see here, this enables extremely fine motor control. This is designed to closely mimic human hand movements and behavior. It also integrates high-resolution tactile sensors across much of the hand. And this allows for very sensitive touch feedback that enhances grasping and manipulation ability. Notice that for the demos you're seeing right now, this is teleoperated, so someone is like behind the scenes moving this remotely. So this is not autonomous, but as you can see, it's still very impressive. This can like spin a pen, this can hold chopsticks, or even this really thin plastic film very firmly, or this really tiny object, as you can see here. But it's also super powerful. So here it's like lifting a 5-kilogram dumbbell with just 2 fingers, and it's able to maintain a very firm grip. Or here's an even more impressive demo where this is able to grip a 20-kilogram water jug like this. And apparently, even if you smash it, it doesn't break and it remains fully functional. This is the first time I've heard of them, but this Wuji hand demo is pretty impressive.